episode 5 of the Tunic Counter Gamers. Have you ever finished a turn in Flesh and Blood thinking, why do I feel like I'm losing even though I did 12 damage? Welcome to the misunderstood monster that is tempo. Today, we're digging into one of the most crucial yet confusing concepts in Flesh and Blood, tempo. It's the difference between steamrolling your opponent or getting steamrolled. Once you understand tempo, there will be no need to throw a tempo tantrum. So, and remember, it takes two to tempo.
It gets me every time. Gets me every time.
If Ming's not laughing, I don't feel like I've done my part. So
that's how you know.
My name's Will.
Ning?
I'm Trevor.
And in short, tempo is about the proactive approach to controlling your games instead of just reacting. So, last week on Tunic Counter Gamers, before we start this topic, what did we learn since last week, fellas?
I guess I can go first. So I was playing Arachne slipped through the cracks in last week's armory, and that in itself is such a time because you Arachne's ability is you give the first stealth a card, go again, no matter whose turn it is, right? So you can give yourself a go again on your stealth cards, and you can give your opponent those. So when you're playing against another assassin, you inherently make life more difficult for you because you have now just given your opponent more lines. One thing I did learn, however, is that for me anyway, the Mask of Deceit seems like a pretty good headpiece to run against other assassins, mainly because when you give your opponent this inherent buff of stealth cards give and go again, when you block with the Mask of Deceit, you are able to sneakily take away that first go again. How good is that? I don't know. But within the topic of tempo, I feel like it's very interesting where your opponent may feel like they have the tempo and, they're ramping up. They're expecting to be able to use their go again. And then you just take that away because you blocked with your headpiece.
Yeah. So, it's a cool interaction.
It's pretty fun. Mm-hmm. It's pretty fun.
And Trevor, did you want to go next or?
Yeah, sure. I've still been learning DO, so I think I've done that every week is what I'm learning, but I've been focusing more on a fatigue, like actually having a game plan now, and to do that I've been playing with some of our locals just on Talishar. But I've been going pretty good. Thomas from Siblings and Cardboard kind of walked me through a game, and that really helped me a lot. And then Aaron Cuthbert, who's kind of been doing on a tear with DO the past few things he's been on. He's been helping me out a bit as well. So it's been going pretty good.
Yeah, I think Aaron was on a podcast recently, the Techlo Foundry, because he did a really good in Memphis with his DO deck. And they brought him in because he day two'd and actually made it really far in that tournament. So it's pretty good to see our locals kind of getting more recognition.
I think it was maybe Anarchy Please, that channel.
Okay.
But he's another mech guy.
Gotcha. Thanks for the correction. Speaking of corrections, I learned that Fang is hard, right? Deceptively, on the surface, you would think it's a warrior. It's easy. But coming from Vincent Reinar KO, man, it's like relearning all the stuff I had to learn and everything we talked about in the last 4 or 5 weeks again, right? And it's sometimes so depressing when you are getting stomped so hard and you're like, man, I'm not playing the value. I know I'm not playing the value, but I really don't know how to interact with my opponents yet. So it's always kind of fun to experience that going in with a new hero. No concept, never played a warrior before, just never really been one of my things, but I have the Marvel Fang, and I was like, man, it's such a pretty card. I want to use it. So I built the deck, got all the cards I needed because, we opened enough Hunted, and man, it was fun because I'm playing Flesh and Blood, but it was not enjoyable because I'm learning a new hero, and so it's always that learned thing. So, and trying to pick out value with, I feel like some cards that are undervalued are just like less value than, let's say, Brute. It's kind of interesting to kind of switch, and change that mindset. Thankfully, though, no Tunic counters to remember. So that's one thing. So, all right.
Maybe not yet.
Not yet, right? You never know. He might evolve, but I'm going to give him a couple more tries because usually the first week you try a deck, you're going to have
Yeah.
difficulties. You're not going to feel like you're really
Mhm.
matching up with him. So the first
Mhm.
armory I play with a new hero, I'm just going to say that's a wash, right? Maybe I'll get it intrinsically, but sometimes I'll need a full slew of armories, like the next 3, right? The 9 games to kind of see if I really like this hero or not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's especially before I make any changes. So,
Yeah.
all right. So part of this part of learning what we did last week is also reviewing some of the comments we've had previously. So, Ning, do you want to mention the first comment?
Sure. So our commenter Illusionist4230, in response to, I guess, the segment where I was kind of talking about interactions with Codex of Frailty. Well, they said a very interesting play you can do as a brute into Codex is wait for them to choose their card. If it's something like CNC that puts the arsenal, CNC as in Command and Conquer, that puts the arsenal into the graveyard, you can put Beast Within in there and get the trigger. The trigger being if Beast Within is put into the graveyard other than, I guess, the actually attacking, then you get to draw a card until you get an action card. Is that how that works? Our resident brute player? Yeah.
So pretty much you keep on pitting cards into your graveyard until you top a attack action card with 6 or more power, and then you lose a life for every card that's in the graveyard.
Yeah. So basically negating the effect that CNC is doing of stripping one card away from you. That's a pretty neat trick. So I'll definitely have to be a little bit more cognizant when I play against brutes as assassin.
Mhm.
So good to know. Good comment.
Another little thing you can do is if they're making you discard, you have the Beast Within in your hand. You can get rid of it from there too. It's the same thing. You don't get to do the draw. Yeah.
Oh, that's
pretty
fun.
cool.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty
And
fun.
I know I was trying with my Reiner deck, Nasty Surprise, which
Yeah.
that's
funny.
that's more of a, I don't know if it's a, it worked once and it felt really
It did?
good. It really did, right? And they
Wow.
codexed me and I looked at them, I was like, gotcha, you son of a bitch. Right?
Hell yeah.
But it's the only
That's
time out of the 9
funny.
games I played where I actually got it off.
Mhm.
Is it worth it? No. But until LSS prints another blue card that's a 6 attack, then it might stay in or I might go ahead because it's either this, Warmonger's Diplomacy, or something else. So that's off topic, but it's out there.
Yeah.
We also had another comment. Thanks. We also had another comment from Donnie from Siblings and Cardboard Podcast. And it's in reference to the value. And what he was describing was a design theory called the Rule of 8. It's a term coined by the community. I actually didn't know that this was actually a term. So I look forward to actually going on the Purple Discord, LSS's official Discord, and kind of looking this up a little bit more. But he's saying each individual card gets a total of 8 points. And if you basically add up all the total of the pitch color, the attack value, the defense value, minus the resource cost, you should be close to around 8 points. Right? So I'm going to look forward, especially in our upcoming set review, how much this comes up. So a little spoiler alert, we're going to probably use the rule of 8, or at least mention it again. But for new players, and this is a learning journey podcast, it's the first time I heard of this concept, so I'm looking forward to kind of going and looking at it in the future. So,
Yeah,
thanks,
absolutely.
guys. And keep the comments coming. We appreciate it. So, now let's get back to the main topic, what we're talking about this week, tempo. Tempo, who wants to start? Like, what's your understanding of tempo? How do you guys want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I could give my opinion on it, and then we can see what y'all think. But
Sure.
tempo to me is just kind of like who's in the driver's seat of the game. It's really the one who's like setting the pace, right? And we're all in that situation when you're like low on life and your opponent's just like attacking you. Then they're obviously the ones with the tempo there, right? Because all you can do is block. But like during like a game, it can kind of shift back and forth, right? Where they can be swinging at you, but if you have like a life buffer and you can take a big hit down, but you keep a full hand, you're kind of saying like I can use this hand to get the tempo away from my opponent, and then I can be in control, and then like I can set the pace, and I can like try to control the game and hopefully end with a win here.
So I like how you mentioned the whole car thing. It's like you live your life a quarter mile at a time, right? Fast and Furious quote. Anyways, now I'm dating myself.
I don't know that one.
Trevor's like, okay, now I feel old. So
I got you.
thank you, Ning. Actually, when we first started talking about tempo, I do like the analogy of the driver's seat or the car, and who has a tempo. You know, I didn't quite know how to describe tempo. I do know I've heard of it before, and it usually was in reference to chess. But when I was doing research for this podcast, I found out it's literally means time in Italian, and in music it's referred to the speed at which the piece of music is played. A faster tempo is usually more urgency. A slower tempo is more space and tension. And in chess, this kind of translated to chess where it means a turn or a move. But in chess, this looks like if you make your opponent waste a move to kind of back up or be defensive, then you gained the tempo. So it evolved to kind of mean dictating the pace of the game, which is what going back to what Trevor means. It's about dictating the pace of the game, controlling the flow of the turns, and really kind of forcing your opponent into suboptimal plays. So how do you get tempo? Right? Like we're talking about tempo, we're defining it, and misunderstand tempo. I like how I just combined all those terms. Misunderstanding tempo can lead to poor plays like overblocking, inefficient turns, or mismanaging that pressure, like usually via go again or going wider. But how do we get tempo? How do we keep it? Like, what's that look like?
I don't know. I don't know if this is something I should be talking about. I'm awful about managing tempo.
Well, Uzuri probably does it differently than other heroes too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Because the way that Uzuri functions, as we mentioned before, is generally speaking, you block with 2 cards, and then you do a 2-card action, and then you just kind of keep that going over and over again. And overall, the best way to gain the tempo where you are in the driver's seat and they have to worry more about blocking is when you play this mid-rangey game to the point that they just draw a really bad hand, and then suddenly you can do more than the usual 2-card action. So I think that is one way to gain tempo as that kind of character.
Yeah. I mean, in Azuri specifically, like some of the best things that you can do is do like isolate into a relevant on hit, like CNC when they have an arsenal, that'll get you, a card from them or 2 if they want to like keep it. And then if you can also run like the tech cards, like Erase Base into Mechanologist will, completely shut down their turn since they can't boost anymore. And if you're kind of like time walking them in a sense, you're getting that tempo. So,
and Trevor, can you explain time walking for those that haven't came Magic the Gathering or had a long history in TCGs?
Yeah, I don't know if that's like a card or something, but it just means like taking an extra turn, right? Because like
it was one of the Power 9.
Okay, that's cool. I've only ever heard the term.
Did I lose connection there? Are you guys here?
Oh, shoot.
So sometimes Ning didn't pay his electric bill. No, I'm just joking, Ning. He lost tempo for a second there.
I am going to refresh. I'll be right back.
So that's an example of losing tempo in a podcast series. So he'll be right back. But you're saying Erase Face to gain tempo through the use of disruption?
Yeah. So like disruption in general, Erase Face like specifically is really good into the Mechanologist, right? Because most of them, they function by boosting. And if you take that option away from them, you're going to really inhibit their turn. Pretty much. They're probably just going to have to take an off one and just play some items and hope that they draw a better hand next turn.
Gotcha. And what's a couple other ways that you could lose or gain tempo?
Yeah, like I think Aurora gains tempo pretty much just by presenting like 12 to 16 damage like very consistently every turn with her 4 goes against, and that's just a lot of damage, right? So you can't be a deck that's just like, I can take this turn, I can take it next turn, I can take it next turn, because you do that too many times and you're dead, right? So if you're a deck that can just like send big numbers like over and over again, that's getting tempo in a way, because you're going to be forcing cards from them. And then if you're on the opposing side of that person who's just sending these numbers at you, you have to realize like I'm gonna be losing tempo in like 1 or 2 turns because I'm gonna have to respect these when I'm at a lower life total. So you're gonna have to give cards, and when you have less cards, you have less opportunities to get the tempo back. So just big damage is a really good way to do it, and that's how most of the aggro decks function.
Hey guys, sorry about that. What did I miss?
Yeah, we were just talking about Aurora and how she gets the tempo by doing a lot of damage, right? So that's what she's trying to force you to. She's trying to get you low enough so that you have to block with all these 4 go-agains. Puts you down low really quick, and then once you're at low life, you start losing that tempo.
I feel like that getting tempo through those breakpoints is really annoying. or rather, being on the other side of it, right?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I know, like, talking about tempo, I know Ira, and correct me if I'm wrong, she has a lot of relevant on hits, and her +1 on the second attack is more relevant on her on hits, like when she does her attack, and it's like you just talked about race face, command and conquer, but you can gain tempo, and I know we mentioned disruption before, but this is also another form of disruption by presenting relevant on hits that could take tempo back by disrupting your opponent.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Uses those sensors too. She names the right card, your turn's bricked.
Isn't there a new ninja card that you could look at their hands for reactions?
You mean cut from the same?
I think that's a warrior card.
I think that's an assassin warrior card.
Oh, yeah. Shame.
Yeah. Gosh, if you could have a ninja that would do that,
I think that'd be a little busted, but it would be.
That's cool. Too much. That's too much.
So, what's another way of getting tempo?
In my notes, I also. Oh, sorry. Did you want to go?
No, you go.
I had just blocking with critical equipment is a good one, and the ones that I had in my mind was like Scowling Flesh Bag, and what's the Runeblade one? I can't. Face Purgatory.
Face Purgatory is good.
Yeah, right. Like similar effects where you strip a card on their turn, right, and you can really mess up their plan depending on the deck.
And I know we talk about Scowling Flesh Bag and Face Purgatory, but can you explain? I know we mentioned this in our value conversation, our value pod, our value episode, and we know that's good value, but how does it grab tempo? Can you explain it for those that are still kind of new to the game?
You want to do it, Nick?
Sure. So the big thing with Face Purgatory. Well, let's see. We could talk about Scowling Flesh Bag first, and then we can kind of highlight the difference of how they do it, right? So at first glance, it seems like they kind of do the same thing, right? They block for 2, so that's already a very strong equipment piece. The second thing with Scowling Flesh Bag, when this defends, you intimidate your opponent, which means 1 random card of their hand goes away. Like it'll come back at the end of the turn, but for the rest of this turn while you are attacking, or while you are being attacked, rather, one of your opponent's cards goes away. So that is pretty good tempo, or helps you create tempo because let's say as an Aurora player, I'm playing against a Brute, and I have this plan of using very specific cards in such an order that I can give my cards go again, or create opportunities to give myself go again. Well, what if you end up blocking with Scowling Flesh Bag, and suddenly you take away a key card from my hand that allows me to give go again? So, for example, like in Twine Lightning, where you fuse with a lightning card and your Entwined Lightning gets go again. Well, if you use Scowling Flesh Bag and you intimidate my lightning card away, suddenly you take away all of my ways to get go again. And this turn where I was about to present 16 points of damage suddenly ends up being maybe only 4 or 2 or 4 or 8.
And it's not even including the 2 cards or the 2 block on the Scowling Flesh Bag. So you're also ripping out potential combo card. And as you guys mentioned before, when you do that with Aurora, you're losing 4 points of value on that card you take out. Like this one is 4 attack, so that's pretty
Right.
cool.
Right. And the other big thing with Scowling Fleshbag is it's a random card, which means that I, as the Aurora player who is attacking you, I do not get to choose which card goes away. But when you go to Face Purgatory blocks for 2, and if you block with a non-attack action card and attack action card, then suddenly you can suddenly I, as the attacker, have to discard a card, and you, as the defender, get to gain an extra card. So that kind of interrupts my my game plan as well. And even though it could be not as devastating as the Scowling Fleshbag, where my whole hand required me to use or to keep that lightning card, it still weakens my turn pretty harshly, while you still get to block with all those cards and you still get to gain an extra card. So maybe the cards that you blocked with the Face Purgatory weren't that meaningful for your action turn where you are doing the attacking.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we were talking about blocking with critical equipment to keep good cards and that increases the tempo, but on the same thread as equipment, I like to actually mention Mask of Momentum as a tempo gainer, right? And that even though you're not blocking with this, unless you're in dire straits and you're about to lose the game, this is really effective at gaining tempo because of card advantage, right? And Syndra ninjas, they love this card, right? Obviously, it's a ninja equipment, but that third card or higher in the chain link that's hit, you draw that card, and that draw card is either an arsenal for extra value in the future, or you can actually extend the chain even further, increasing your tempo, right?
Yeah, I would even just like kind of equivalent cards that you have to tempo, right? And like on defense, Scowling Fleshbag and Phase Purgatory take a card away, so you're taking tempo away, kind of, and then Mask of Momentum on the opposite for attacking. If you let it hit, then you gain tempo because you're getting an extra card. And you get it kind of, I mean, it's in the name, it's momentum, right? To keep going.
Yeah.
And it blocks for 2. That's crazy.
Yeah, but usually I find if they're blocking with this card, they've lost the momentum in some form or fashion in the first place, and they're trying to get it back.
It can depend. It depends. If you're low on life, they're low on life. It keeps you alive, and then you get to swing at Materia Kodachis. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
How many times have we lost due to Kodachi lock? And for any new player that hasn't experienced this, it is a frustrating and beautiful thing when they get it on you. It's like, oh man, I am stuck. I cannot win because they keep on sending these one attacks, and you have to block or you're dead. And Kodachi lock is when you're usually at 1 life, and the Kodachis will come through, and you have to block, and you're usually giving them a 2 or 3 blocks, so you're losing value on that, and they're ripping cards from your hand. And at this point, when you're Kodachi locked, it just pretty much means your opponent has tempo, and you're about to die. So that's the way I read it.
That's like the ultimate tempo, I think. Is like
you're
at 1 life against a ninja, they're doing this every turn. You're not a happy camper. There's not a lot you can do in that situation.
Right, and it is a bad feeling, right? So, and I know there's more. Like tempo is such an interesting conversation because it's so in depth, and it's such a simple term. And like for those new players, you might hear it thrown around a lot, but it does mean so many things. Like to me, like once we talked about the basics, we could understand that tempo really represents the speed at which a player progresses toward their win condition. And whether that win condition is dealing damage, setting up a board state, or forcing fatigue, the player closest to winning or achieving their win condition is really ahead on tempo, right? So whatever your deck is designed to do, and when we do a deck breakdown, I know, we might do a max nitro deck tech breakdown once we get a few more reps with it, but part of that is to know what their win condition is, right?
Yep.
Trevor, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not. I think one thing that you said I don't really agree with is like, if I think you said like if you're trying to fatigue, you can have the tempo, but I think like an example that like I've been struggling with is like you Dio into the Earth Heroes, right? Because pretty much as the Dio, you'll have the tempo like basically the whole game. You're keeping your hand and you are just like sending it all at them, and they're pretty much just blocking, giving you your hand. But then Dio has this problem where you're boosting to like get cards off your deck, you're activating Tech Low Heart, you're getting rid of more cards just so that you can like try to gas them down as like fast as you possibly can. And I would say you have tempo, right? Because you're in control of the game for the vast majority of it. But
so about that though, if you're attacking and a guardian is doing what a guardian does, guards, right? Is that really you being in control, or is that the guardian letting you think you're in control because you're swinging on the attack?
That's that reverse tempo tech, you know.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, so, like, and that's where I'm saying, like, you know, it kind of goes back to, and I get what you're saying, like, you're the one in control of the attack and the actions, but the guardian's letting you do your game plan because it doesn't bother their game plan, which is, I want you to use your attacking cards, I want you to fatigue yourself, and so I have full control of this game. Right, you're at my pace.
I can kind of agree to disagree. Like, okay, I get what you're saying for sure. Like, I do think like it's a winning strategy.
Yeah,
but I don't know if it's tempo, right? Like, I don't think that's, in my mind at least. Like, when I think of tempo, I really do equivalent it to like how many cards you have and like how much you're like doing with that, you know, like proactively instead of like
reactively.
Blocking.
I got you.
Well, I suppose I don't know. I can see both ways in the sense that, you know, back to the analogy that Trevor gave at the beginning, where if you're the one in the driver's seat, you most likely have tempo. So if to Will's point, if the Guardian or the Florian or whoever, right, is doing exactly what they want, where they're blocking perfectly, and then maybe they swing like an extra 3, or maybe they don't, but they're able to not get too much damage, or they don't get too damaged, and they heal on their turn or whatever. Then I could argue there's some tempo or reverse tempo that's happening.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting
being called tempo.
Well, and maybe we just leave it up to our viewers, right? Honestly,
the viewers.
Yes, you guys, the viewers. Love it, Ding. Comment below. Tell us what you think, because, you know, obviously, and I would say defer to Trevor on this because he has a lot more experience in this game than I do, and he actually day 2'd, and I'm still learning, right? But it's kind of interesting because I always thought tempo could be defensive. Like, if you control the defensive, like, there's decks out there that play 9D reacts, whole bunch of block cards, and then that's how they maintain their tempo, but their game state and their win condition, you know, because they're not playing to their opponent's pace. That's my thought on it. But I can actually, like, when Trevor is explaining things and saying he agree to disagree, I actually kind of agree with Trevor too. But I'm also stubborn. I kind of agree with me too. So I'm waffling back and forth. But we could be in this case where we're both right. But I'd be curious what the viewers think.
Yeah. It's because kind of like Trevor's example of playing Dio and Fatigue. You know, playing as Aurora going into Jarl. It feels like I should have the tempo, but it also feels very annoying when I play into that matchup where I'm attacking, but they keep on either healing or they're blocking or they're doing everything. And so I do think to myself a lot, like, this is very unfun. Does this mean I don't have the tempo in this instance, right? Because they're able to do whatever they do. I'm throwing out everything, and I'm kind of starting to gas out. So I feel like in that instance, for me, I do not have control of the tempo, even though I am throwing out a decent amount of damage, either the average amount or maybe a little more.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm more convinced now. I'm more convinced.
Yeah. When I explain it, you know, But when Will explains
when Nate started talking, that's when it really started making a lot of sense.
Well, you know, what can I say? That's why you have him on here, right? So I guess a couple of the questions I had is, like, and it's kind of funny because this is just natural progression of our podcast. But when did you first realize you didn't understand tempo? And I guess we kind of answered it with our prior conversation that we're still understanding tempo. Because even though, you know, I know, Trevor, you've been playing for 2 years, and me and Ing's been around a year, we're still learning, especially such a simple concept, such a term that's thrown around a lot, but it's still such a in-depth piece the conversation, that we're still kind of bridging our understanding on it too, right? Is that a fair
Mhm.
assessment, guys?
Yep, I agree with that.
I'd say so.
Always learning.
And how do you decide when to grab the tempo?
Very poorly. Like I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I think we mentioned this either in the first or second podcast where we were talking about grabbing the tempo. It can go back and forth. When do you grab it? So like, do you try to have it at the very beginning, or do you try to uh, give it to the other, quote unquote, give it to the other person until they mess up either with a bad hand, or you're able to just block it out until they start to not have as much gas in their deck. I feel like every time I've tried to grab the tempo at the beginning of the match, it's generally been a lot. It's gone poorer for me because when everybody has so much health, and life is a resource for sure. I try to grab the tempo by disrupting their hand, disrupting their arsenal, maybe take a little bit of damage, but overall, I'm trying to take that value away, right? 1 or 2 cards away from their hand or their turn. And so to me, I'm like, okay, if I do this now, I can grab the tempo. But the problem with the decks that I play with is it's not always the most coherent hands that you will draw, right? I think for the most part, you can argue that most decks don't have hands that always play 100% effectively. Arguably, that's why the arsenal exists. But even then, sometimes you just don't have a good hand. And so you can give the tempo up yourself by trying to go so hard and then ending up in a situation where you got yourself a bad hand, and now there's the turnaround, and they're like, oh, they screwed up. I have a 5-card turn. They go all in, and suddenly you just lost the tempo because now they have on-hit effects. They're taking cards away from you, either a surprise CNC or which is a generic card or otherwise. And now you're on the back end. But I've already used up all of my tools to take the tempo, like our face purgatories or whatever equipment. So I think it's for me, it's definitely still a learning process of trying to figure out at what point in the match should I decide, okay, this is the turn, I'm going to take it, and hopefully they respect me taking the tempo. Because sometimes they don't do that, and that becomes its own problem.
And Ning, when you say take the tempo, is that under the assumption in turn 0 you're going first and that your opponent's going second, or is that just in general you're taking the tempo? Because I don't think we mentioned how going first or second sets the tempo too. So we'll talk about that next.
Sure. No, I just mean specifically, I am doing something where I want to play my entire hand now, and I am trying not to block, right? So more akin to Trevor's definition of tempo, where I'm playing out all my cards, I'm the one attacking, and trying to achieve that where your opponent is the one defending. So if you ever end up in a situation where Aurora is defending, you know you have the tempo. You know what I mean?
That's not a good situation for Aurora to be in.
Absolutely not.
And I know we didn't really talk about it, but going first or going second, the advantage of going second is the tempo setting piece of it, right? That's why you want to go second, correct?
Yeah, as an aggro deck, I think.
As an aggro deck.
And then also I think most control decks just want to go second because they don't want the aggro deck going second, because you don't want to give them that opportunity to start like stripping your cards away, your resources, your ways to take back tempo immediately. Because on the first turn, you draw back up, but every turn after, you're losing those cards.
Right.
And that kind of goes back to your point, Trevor, of like, hey, I got this full grip, I'm attacking. And that's also, you're setting the pace, you're setting the tempo, right? Because if I went first and I didn't properly arsenal or set myself up, then I'm using these cards to block or I'm losing life, which is a resource in itself. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know you were mentioning in your notes earlier, Trevor, how do you decide when to let tempo go? Like, and it was just a vague statement, but I thought that was so interesting. You want to go ahead and explain that? Tell me
Yeah, it's
what you were
very
mentioning.
profound, I think.
Listeners,
I
sit
think,
down. Listen. He's about to spout the
yeah,
wisdom.
no, don't put that much pressure. The only thing I had on my mind when I typed that out was kind of like, you just kind of let your deck tell you, is usually what I do, right? Like, if you draw like a stinker hand, you don't have to be like, oh, I have to keep like all these cards. Like, obviously, don't keep something that you can't utilize every card in the hand. Just like start blocking. You can pump the brakes a bit, right? And then, like, if you have like 3 blues and CNC, you block with 2 of them, you send CNC, right? Like, you're still like maintaining control, but it doesn't have to be like a complete banger every single time.
I think the other thing to remember is also your opponent does have limited copies of a very specific card, right? So in an example of playing against like Assassin or something, where they're playing all these, Persuasive Prognosis or Just the Nyx or Bonds of Agony, these 3 cards where they function very well together. Even if you quote unquote let go of the tempo and you're blocking these out, they're gonna not have these cards in the future, right? And so you're, by blocking it out and I guess giving up the tempo because your cards aren't very good, you're still allowing yourself in the future to realize, oh, you know what? I know that these cards are no longer in their deck, so I can go ahead and take it at some point and not be scared of them drawing those cards.
And maybe that's like also going to your point, Trevor, where you let tempo go because you had that break or you had that bad hand, and and it's such a close game, but maybe you don't force it. You just let it naturally happen, where you have to pump your brakes and then let them play out a little bit of their cards before you seize that opportunity again.
Yeah, I think even the example I gave was kind of bad because 3 blues and CNC is fine, But if you drew like all blues, then you can't convert, then you can walk out.
Or as Reinhardt, 3 nasty surprises, right? No, I'm just joking. But it did bring up an interesting question, and it relates back to last week's podcast about value, and this week's about keeping tempo. I'm curious, like, ideally we have it both in the same world, but maximizing your value versus keeping your tempo, sometimes it's not the same thing. Like, ideally you want it to match up, but what's more important, do you think, for a new player to kind of focus on, or is it just so match dependent?
I think it depends a lot about what point you are in the game.
Yeah.
Because if you're in the mid game or early game where everyone's at high life totals, you should be maximizing value, and just doing as much as you can. But if your opponent's at like 1 life, you can kind of and you have like a big life buffer, you're at like 20, you can just like take all the damage and send back as much as you can because they have to respect you. But you're still very much in the driver's seat and you're going to be taking cards. So you're going to be keeping tempo there, and then keeping tempo like when they're low kind of feeds into itself because you strip the cards, they stay low on cards, they're low on life, and then you keep more cards, you keep coming back at them. It's really hard for them to like get tempo back.
So
do anything about you.
Trevor, this is off topic. Every time you say driving the car, I'm imagining you're driving Truck Coon, and you're coming.
I'm driving
Truck Coon.
What are you talking about?
You don't watch anime, dude? All right. So
Truck Coon is how the it's now popular genre for that isekai stuff where somebody gets hit by a truck and then they get sent to a parallel world or they get reincarnated or something or other. So generally speaking, for whatever reason, they always get hit by a truck. So the online community has dubbed this Truck Coon.
So I'm driving the truck that's like running over anime boys.
All right, girls, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying, like,
but
anyways, that's kind of why I laughed because you're running your opponent over. Anyways, off topic, guys. You can fast forward this part. It's only 30 seconds. Um, so do you guys have any stories about when you failed to grab tempo and why? Or even better, like, when your opponent took the tempo unexpectedly?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is me grabbing the tempo incorrectly, and so they don't really care. So I try to like with I know. So I've heard many times Azuri is very good into Azalea, but granted, I play against our resident Azalea player, Evan, who, top eights with Azalea all the time in all these big tournaments. But I always have a hard time beating him as Azuri. Even though I try to disrupt or try to do this or that, he just says, "Who cares?" And he just shoots the big arrow anyway, even though I'm trying to block and disrupt and do all the things. Yeah. And so, like, I'll try to take tempo. I even, when starting point came out, right, the foot piece that lets Azuri give go again on after the switcheroo, I tried to do like a switcheroo CNC starting point, do another disruption, and it just gets ignored, and he takes it. So he gets stripped 2 cards, and he still keeps going. It's like, oh, alrighty then. Let's move on with our lives now. So.
I mean, you're talking about Azalea, but at times your opponent can take the tempo unexpectedly. I mean, we gotta mention the beast in the room here. All right, Red and Ledger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was actually talking with Evan last night, and he was saying Azalea is a tempo deck, which
interesting.
I kind of agree with, because like she kind of does it with like these disruption effects, like Red in the Ledger and inertia for LT traps or whatever. But I think Red in the Ledger is the big one, right? Because this, I think, strips, because they get this dominate, they buff it. You're stripping the tempo and you're doing damage, right?
Right.
And then, like, worst case scenario for your opponent, they block with like 1 card and they keep 3 and they can only send 1 of them back. So they're kind of IPing themselves, like intellect penalty. They're not using all the cards to their maximum value. That's like a really bad situation to be in.
No.
And when this card first got played, to me as a new player, I could not fathom I only get 1 action step during my turn when I had the ability to roll scabs, right? And they had to methodically explain to me why this shuts you down, right? And, I never even thought about Azalea as being a stereotypical tempo deck, right? So that totally makes sense, though, because a lot of her cards, it is designed to grab the tempo and keep it, right?
Right.
But even with all the relevant on hits, disruptions are the big beefy arrows coming at you.
Yeah.
So I know we already talked about the turn efficiency and the card value, but to go back to how value and tempo do kind of correlate sometimes, and you ideally want them to point in the same direction or work together synergistically, but like a good card value would be a 1 card 5 damage. A lot of them came out recently that your opponent has to eat 2 cards to block. Right, is pretty much you gaining pure tempo. Right, and this could look like Ira on that second swing using that 5 attack to be a 6 attack. Right, because they're going to use 2 cards to block that 1 card. Right. So anytime you use 1 of your cards to take 2 of their cards, you're getting tempo and you're progressing your game state. Right.
I think with Ira, she's one of those decks where she gains tempo because she plays value very well, right? Where she can very easily always get 8 value out of two cards, and generally speaking, there's also a relevant on-hit effect too, which arguably is even more value if you don't respect it. So,
yeah.
Then I know we've already mentioned disruption, like heroes with on-hit effects create tempo by reducing opponents' turns. And I know this was, like, I used a Jarl and the Frostbite, and you guys mentioned the Stalagmite, right? Bashing the Eisenloft, where you could use this to block, and it creates a frostbite under your opponent. And a frostbite is a pain in the. It's a pain to handle, right? And it definitely forces your opponent to inadvertently pump the gas, or I'm sorry, pump the brakes a little bit, all right, in order to handle this frostbite token.
Yeah, I mean, it can affect your turn just as much as like Scowling Fleshbag or Face Purgatory. You know, if you can't pay for the last card in your hand when they block with this Stalagmite, they give you that frostbite at the right time. Like it's, you know, I mean, in Dio, they do it on the attack right before you max V them, and then you're like, oh no, you know, just has to go in the arsenal. Can't do anything about it.
Hey, but this is a important time to remember your tunics, kids, because as a reaction to the effect of Stalagmite, you're able to activate your tunic so that you have a floating resource to kind of counter this extra frostbite. But if you gain the frostbite before you turn on the counter, then suddenly it costs an extra resource to turn on the tunic to get that resource back, and that's just very inefficient.
We might need a little rules check there. I think like you have to do it before they even block with the Stalagmite.
No, because you can, because you have the win because it's an instant, right? So it's an instant ability on a card, so it's not an action.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, maybe you are right, because I think you could do instants in response to like Scowling and stuff, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, if it's like that, then yeah.
How do I know this? Because when Evan was playing Jarl and I was playing Azuri, and that Stalagmite was always sitting there, and I was always scared of it. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna activate Tunic now. And that was just kind of floating there. And then I would play my turn to kind of counteract it. And afterwards, he was like, you could just do it in response, right? I was wondering why this Tunic was why you always had a floating resource.
That's really good to know.
Yeah.
That is good to know. Yeah, but also we were talking about Stalagmite, but this really does, stop the tempo on a lot of red line decks or aggressive decks, because they can't afford to pay for that frostbite. Like you were saying, it just shuts down their third or fourth card that you're trying to use. It really just disrupts them. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned red line. That's important. Like Syndra does not deal well with frostbite. They have to pitch a whole card for this.
Yeah.
Aurora doesn't like it either normally.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we have a great understanding of tempo, and hopefully our viewers going through the games trying to understand this back and forth dance, if you would. I don't know why I said it kind of creepy, guys. I don't know what's wrong with me tonight. But anyways, now we're getting to the breaking the common misconceptions and myths section of our podcast. Do you have one you want to ask, Trevor? Or?
Yeah, check it for myself. One myth I have is that whoever has tempo is winning the game.
I would say false. Really, the reality of it is that, and this is from my own personal experience. Certain decks don't care about their life. Well, they care about their life totals, but unless they're dead, it doesn't mean you're winning. Right? They're just setting up their combo turn, or they're setting up their comeback turn, whatever it might be. And I mentioned Prism. Because for me, the only good Prism is a dead Prism, right? Because even at 1 or 2 life, they still get the ALS loop, and when they do that loop, you're shafted so hard unless you're playing the boots, right? And my gosh, I can't believe I forgot my own boots.
Time skippers.
Lightning Greaves you could also play, right? The one where if you pitch one into the Lightning Greaves, all of your instances have go again. So
that works.
Yeah. So what you can do is you can attack the Arc Light Sentinel, which has Spectra. But if you play a lightning card, you get a free action point after that. So then you can keep on with your turn.
Instant card.
Yeah. Or you just play a blink. And
then I was referring to Scabskin Leathers to combat the LLS loop. But I forgot about it.
Sometimes.
It works sometimes.
Unless you need it to work, and then it works none of the times.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I mentioned Prism because that ALS loop, once they get it off, it's very, very hard to get them back because that really does shut down a lot of people's tempo because of the nature of the spectra, right? And
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
can completely lock some decks out of the game.
and
It's hard to
ALS,
do.
I always forget what that means, right?
It's Arclight Sentinel.
That's right. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ning. Because we use the abbreviation so much, but yeah, this is their main combo cards that really shut things down, and so this kind of disrupts why you can have the momentum. You're feeling good about that, but doesn't necessarily mean you're winning. All right. Which you have any other thoughts on that, Ning?
No, I just don't really like playing against Prism. The TLDR.
Well, that's why I always say the only good Prism is a dead Prism, which is funny because I'm going to build my Prism deck and
Yeah, I
actually start
know,
playing it.
right?
Well, here's the other. Honestly, here's the other thing that I dislike about, and this is a whole different conversation. But the whole issue I have with the Arclight Sentinel is it's Spectra, which means you can attack it and you have to attack it. So when you attack it, that's it. Turn is over. So there's no opportunity to do any attack reactions, to flick knives or do anything to be able to still attack other things or try to deal damage. I don't know. But anyway, now we're about to have like a second not as good version in the Pirates deck, but that's a conversation for another day.
So I don't know. You talking about Chum Bucket?
Or whatever.
I don't know. Is that his name? I'm so bad with names.
Just Chum.
Oh,
guy.
Yeah, he's just a friendly dude.
Gotcha. Do you have a second myth, Trevor?
Yeah, another one I wrote was the only way to keep tempo is to not block and then keep the whole hand to send back.
Yeah, I feel like this, again, goes back into our conversation of who's really in the driver's seat, right? Like, Ira, for example, her whole game plan is block with a couple of cards and have very efficient value turns with either relevant on-hit effects or just very efficient value turns. And so if you for her, that is her tempo, right? That is what she wants to do. And when you're doing exactly what you want to do, then you're the one who has that tempo, whether your opponent realizes it or not.
It makes me think we get to like a spot where both players think they have the tempo.
Yeah.
Just block and she's happy. The aggro just swing and they're happy.
Yeah. Absolutely. But then you can always tell. Not everybody's like Prism where you can come back with 1 HP, right? And so you can always kind of tell when you're gauging how healthy you are compared to your opponent. You're like, I feel like I'm doing big stuff, but why is my HP going down faster than them? Then you kind of have to realize, and that's what I was saying before in previous episode, where I personally have to be more cognizant of the board state and where everybody's health is at and the deck is at, because just kind of like what we were saying with Dash IO, she's like pushing everything out, doing all the damage, but she's also very susceptible to decking herself. So it's always just like, oh, everybody thinks they have the tempo, but there's always somebody who has the true tempo, and you need to, as the player, be more observant and figure that part out.
Yeah, and to go back to the actual the myth, right? We've already talked about, like, how many times can you defensively disrupt your opponent, right? So you don't have to, not block, take all this damage, because you really, like, keeping tempo is staying alive long enough where it actually matters, right? And so blocking with disruptive cards like your frostbites or your scowlings or anything of that sort, and then being able to take that turn and like really read that pivot and then go back into launching an attack, because you really want to, as Trevor states earlier, rip the cards out their hands by forcing them to block, and that's where weapon value, card value comes into play too. So I think that myth is busted. Yeah. And it's really not about just damage output. It's about decision denial, which is what we're kind of talking about here. Right? It kind of goes into another myth that I've seen is tempo means dealing the most damage. Right? And I think we've talked about this the whole episode. Right? What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I see your notes on the prism, and I feel like you just wanted to say again that any good prism's a dead prism.
I just was able to move that topically to the previous point. All right, no need to beat the dead prism.
Exactly.
Tempo is just really about control.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty much the myths busted. Like, we're covering it. It's not just about the damage. It's not just about the swinging. It really is about the control. About making sure you have the control of the game. Actionable tips. Ways that you could actively think in your games about the tempo situation, so you have a better understanding of this. And I will admit, this is something I am completely weak at. I have never really I know when I have control of the game, I feel good, right? But I also know that it's such a tentative thing that when I feel like I have control, I also feel like I'm going to make a mistake and I want to close it out faster. And this sometimes makes me overextend my turn and not play efficiently, but play recklessly. And sometimes tempo is not playing reckless because I'm trying to get as many cards from the grip as possible, and the cards they have in their hand. So it's really at this point I struggle with this too. So I know going forward I'm going to try to actively think about tempo and really estimating who, like what you guys said, who really has a tempo.
Yeah, overextending can leave you in a really bad spot. Like if you're sending your last card because you think it's going to close out the game rather than throw it into Arsenal, and then your opponent has like D-React or whatever you didn't put them on, they could, you're working with like one less card than you could have next turn, and now they could be ready for that with like a scenes.
Or the other more popular thing that happens is you throw out all your cards, and then your opponent is a wizard and says, you don't have cards to pitch into or to do Arcane Barrier anymore? All right, let me do all the things now. And then you lose.
Do that.
You
can't go naked on a wizard.
But I also feel like sometimes if you let's go back to the turn zero conversation. Whoever goes first, they have a chance to arsenal a card. That's a way for them to get back tempo from their opponent when their opponent's going second, right? Because naturally the person that goes second is the person that's generating the tempo, but you have the first chance to set up, first chance to arsenal. And I have a bad habit of thinking, I rather set up and kind of aggressively use the card and not necessarily. And this is my Reiner thing, and our local player Jose always calls me out. He says, "No Arsenal? Will." Right? Every time it's like, it's Reinar. He doesn't need Arsenal the first turn one. Because I like going turn one. Or the first, I would like to be the first person. But he's like, and to his point, that does set me up to go when it's back to my turn. Like, I go first, they go second, and it's back to me. It's harder for me to get that tempo back at that point, right? Because I didn't set myself up on my turn one.
But then there's the other part, right? Where if you play against, like, say, a Florian or Verdance or somebody who likes to decompose, and you're throwing attacks at them and they get to block with earth cards so that they can decompose, who's really in the driver's seat with that, right? Are you actually attacking them and threatening them, or are you helping them with their game plan? So I know there are some people who, like we were saying with aggro decks, generally want to send everything and maybe you arsenal one card. So like I know there are certain matchups where people will, as an aggro player, will go first and then they'll just say, okay, arsenal pass, right? So you're no longer giving your earth hero opponent a chance to block with earth cards, and you'll have a strong turn because of the arsenal.
And I think that's actually one of the things I made a mistake on with Fang, playing against Noah's Verdance, right? I helped him get the Earth cards into his graveyard, right? And he was like, "You shouldn't have done that." So, and that was a pivotal part where, yeah, I thought I had the tempo, but really helping him, it got him to get the tempo and his game plan online faster. So,
Right.
Mhm.
all right. So, what's a couple other action items that people could take, like if they're like me or they're new to the game? Because again, this is a learning journey podcast, or even things that you guys want to sharpen up and really utilize in your games. What could we do to kind of be more aware of this tempo situation? Because it is an advanced concept, and we want to get better at this. Because people that utilize all the tools in Flesh and Blood usually do better in Flesh and Blood. So, what's a couple other action items we could do?
I mean, I feel like one of the best things you can do, and you're talking about not necessarily a myth, but you're talking about is max value the same thing as gaining tempo. I think step one is just understanding what your max value is, and kind of go from there from either a nominal standpoint where you're saying, oh, I have 20 value card hand whatever, or you try to think about, okay, how do I try to disrupt their turn. But I think that would be a step two. The first step would just be try to maximize your the amount of value that you can within a single turn. And then it'll kind of come naturally of, oh, I threw 20 points of damage, but somehow I'm still behind. Why did that happen? And you can kind of piece that together afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Trevor's point earlier where maximized value is more important early game, where keeping tempo is late game. And I know this is a generalization, but that's such a really bite-sized piece of information for people to really chew on, and really understand the importance of value and tempo. So I love that comment earlier, Trevor. Kudos.
Thanks, bro.
All right, and then how about you? Do you have something you wanted to add to that, Trevor?
I think this might only apply to a few heroes, but like a good actionable tip is like if you have one of those like bomb equipments like Face Purgatory, Scowling Flesh Bag, Stalagmite, just try to think like use it when you get a good chance, whenever you think you should, and then just for the rest of the game, even though you don't have it, think like, would it have helped me more in like this situation, like on this turn, and just see if like you would have gotten more value, more tempo in that like later point, right? And then like because like if you use Scowling Flesh Bag and your opponent had like one card and they just kind of like shrug, say okay, and then like arsenal it, and you're like, you kind of maybe just you got tempo like in the meantime, but you didn't really take any value from them. Like they'll just get it next turn, right?
Right, and that's generally my issue for sure. Where I like I said, generally I try to take tempo too early or something like that, and so I have it in the meantime, but I also used up this very powerful equipment when I should have tried to wait for either a better turn or towards the end where the opponent has to start respecting this tempo taking that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because, I'm sorry, go ahead, Trevor.
I was just going to say, use that knowledge in like your future games, right? Like if you realize you could have gotten more value later, or when they do a certain card, certain combo, then try to apply that later, because it's going to be very like case by case. It's not something you can just, I think, prepare for every single situation. You need to kind of experience it.
Yeah. And I do know you mentioned earlier where it's really using your equipment effectively, your blocking equipment effectively. And sometimes I feel like the pieces like we mentioned with the Scowling Flesh Bag and the Stalagmite, when you use these pieces too early, you don't have the fear check or the ability to disrupt them when tempo can really matter, which is what you were saying earlier, closing out the late game, right? That's where the shift in tempo is so important. And so a lot of new players, me included, tend to use their equipment way too early, and then we don't have a way to get that tempo back easily because equipment is part of using that to get tempo back, and even your weapon in some cases too. So
That's a good point.
And I think there's one more thing I would say is a practical applicable tip that I'll try to do is kind of remind myself what's my end goal, right? And plan my turn with end goals in mind, right? What am I trying to force my opponent to do this turn? Use that grip or overextend himself or make that mistake so I could get the tempo back, anything like that. So it's kind of be more conscious of this. And I know a lot of people would be, isn't that just winning the game? Yes, but it's also kind of identifying that point, that trigger point where I could really just pivot, right? And I think the people like you mentioned Evan several times, and he's a great player. He does this really well, right? And a lot of our locals do. We have a strong meta, right? In fact, I think me and Ning are I like to say the foundational players, right? And like Trevor is lucky to be up here with the rest of the with the rest of the
we're the non-armory winners, you know.
We're the bridesmaids, right?
We're the bridesmaids.
That's why we do this, right? So we're like, yeah, that's why we do this. So, all right. Any last comments on the tempo conversation, guys?
No, I think overall the big thing to end on is go in with a game plan, realize your opponent has a game plan. While you're going through it, just check every so often if what you're trying to do is actually working or not. As an Aurora, you're throwing out all these 4 go agains, but if your health is still lowering quicker than your opponent's, then clearly you're not the one with the actual tempo. So I think at the end of the day, this goes back to board state recognition for me now.
Yeah. Okay. And then I know in conclusion, again, tempo is a loop. You either control it or you chase it. The best players force you into their rhythm and leaves you gasping for efficiency, right? So just like it takes 2 to tango or it takes 2 to tempo, right? Take that lead, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the rest of the listeners, if I didn't chase you away with my dorkiness, from Truck Coon to everything else I said podcast, remember to subscribe, drop a comment, and if you like what you're hearing, share it out. But remember, every turn is a decision, every decision is a story, and don't forget your damn Tunic Counter. Peace.
All right, good night.